The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Good evening and welcome to Let's Talk Careers with Sara on Armed Radio. This is again a week that we're going to talk about careers, about leadership, about management, about all tips and advice that you need for your job. So today's Wednesday, 10 p.m. I am very thrilled to talk about the topic again and again because today it's a very special topic that I'm going to talk about. It's either you dealt with it or you are dealing with it currently, or if not, then you are very blessed and perhaps in the future you are going to be dealing with people who are going to be your bosses and who are making your life miserable. Let's face it, we all work with toxic people eventually in some form of life, and especially at work. It can be your coworker, it can be your boss, it can be your supervisor above your boss who is getting at you. So how do you deal with those type of people who are making your life miserable? And it happens to the best of us. We start a new job only to find that our boss is not ideal, right? They might be a micromanager, a visionary that lacks the ability to get the job done, a boss who likes to take all the credit for their team's good work, a poor communicator, a non-communicator, an absentee boss, and the list just goes on and on and on. And in what might be the worst case scenario, your manager doesn't like you or how you do your job, no matter how hard you try, and you are reminded on it on a regular basis. And yes, I know that the manager who is out to get you isn't just a tall tale or exaggeration, but truly does exist in today's world. Because I've seen this type of manager in the workplace firsthand. And I've had employees call me in tears because of their boss belittling and immature behavior, being at their wits and in trying to make the situation work and asking for advice on what to do next. So, I'm not surprised that there are managers exist in this type of organizations. And a couple of these demands that managers usually, to give managers a break though, they often do have their hands full with the work that crosses their own desk, and also feel the pressure of meeting the numbers, lots of goals, and then some. Couple these demands with the fact that many organizations promote managers for the wrong reasons. Being good at your job tactically or technically does not mean you will be a good manager or a leader. And organizations lack management and leadership training. And regardless of why your boss might be less than ideal, you need to determine the best way to work with him or her, especially if leaving your current position isn't an option, which it isn't for many, right? If you live in New York, you cannot be without a job. You have to have a job to pay bills. And below are you cannot even go desperately for a job that pays you below the minimum wage. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to manage your boss to help you evaluate your situation and get the support you need to be productive while maintaining your sanity. So let's start with honestly evaluate the situation. It can be tough to look in the mirror, but take an honest look and determine if there are items on your side of the table to work on that could help improve the relationship with your boss. Maybe you could be more efficient, meet deadlines better, and so on. If we are slacking at work, we typically know it. At the same time, you might be doing the best you can and it still isn't good enough. So take a breath and listen carefully. Understand your boss's issues and communication styles. The better versed you are in the emotional intelligence and how to get along with others, the better positions you will be to deal with tough situations like a difficult boss. Take note of how your boss works and try to meet him on his side of the fence when it comes to work and communication style. Doing so could make your life a lot easier. So, the next thing you can do is create a written record. If your boss is always on your case about what you have or haven't done or that you are not meeting deadlines, be sure to keep a detailed written record of all your work, from what to when to how, as well as any reasons as to why a project or item was delayed. You might also consider scheduling a daily meetup for 5 minutes or so to discuss what you have accomplished and to ensure you understand your manager's priorities of your current task list. This keeps you both accountable and your boss in check. So I advised one employee to take his approach, and it helped her maintain her sanity and provided her with proof of record if her manager approached her about a perceived issue, like accusing her of missing a deadline when she had actually completed the task on time. And keeping written record documents, it's really good to go to HR about this and explain the situation about what is happening. You have all the written documents and there should be no reason to have that manager on your case. So a lot of managers being fired because of that. An employee has approached HR and they investigated the situation and they fired. So to your advantage, HR is your friend. Now, don't waste your energy on thinking about your miserable boss. I've been fortunate to have some amazing managers during my career. Only once did I have a manager that was difficult to work with, to say the least. I was spending much energy thinking about how frustrated he made me and what to do about it, that I was wasting my energy on things I couldn't control. If you find that you are often upset or thinking about your boss, consider paying yourself $1 each time you do it. And save the money for a rainy day. This trick will help you become aware of how much time you are spending on your boss that you could be using for more productive and enjoyable endeavors. It will also allow you to shift your thoughts every time you think of him or her so it doesn't consume you. Then you need to know that you did not do anything wrong if the situation doesn't work out. At the end of the day, some relationships simply don't work well. It takes two to tango and only one to back out of the dance for the dance to fail. Do the best you can and focus on your work until a better scenario comes along. Then take the high road. Choose to act like an adult, even if your boss doesn't, and don't badmouth or gossip about him or her. It won't help the situation. If you need to speak to someone within your organization because your work is being impeded or negatively impacted by the situation with your boss, do so professionally and discreetly. And like I said before, speak to someone in human resources. And this is true too, especially if the behavior of your manager borders harassment or makes you feel unsafe or uncomfortable. HR might also be able to advise you on how to best deal with the situation that you are trying to make work. And this always works. Speak to your boss's boss or someone higher up in the organization that can help. This can be a tricky situation. I know you will need to use good judgment as to when to make this approach, as well as whether or not it will backfire on you. Most employees I speak with are more comfortable going to human resources first. Also, if you choose this approach, it's best to go in with an I'm having a difficult time in dealing with X, and I'm looking for some guidance or suggestions as to how to improve the situation. Instead of pointing the finger and blaming by saying something like, my manager is wrong and difficult and making my life miserable. So that's how you start. I'm having a difficult time to dealing with X, and I'm having a difficult time in dealing with X, and I'm looking for some guidance or suggestions as to how to improve the situation. Okay? Do not start with blaming. Now, refer to a career or personal coach or your mentor. That's another way of dealing with it. It can be helpful to speak with a career coach or mentor to vent, as well as to seek advice and guidance on how to deal with a boss that's making your work life difficult. And someone outside of the situation might be able to give you a perspective that will allow you to deal with the scenario better or even look at it differently. You can conduct an outline search for career coaches to find local career and personal coaches, as well as coaches that conduct sessions via phone. And I am a career coach, so if you need to reach out to me, you can find me on Facebook, Let's Talk Careers with Sarah. You can join my group, Let's Talk Careers Inner Circle, and you can email me, Let's Talk Careers with Sarah@gmail.com. Now let's continue. Then, see the situation as a learning opportunity. Consider the silver lining in a bad boss situation to be the fact that you can learn what not to do to co-workers or employees if you are ever a manager or a supervisor one day. In certain scenarios, we might not get to choose our boss, but we do get to choose how we react to the tough situations in our life. Being dealt a hand that includes a bad boss is not fun, but with the right mindset and approach, you can make it work until you are able to move on to a better environment. This is not fun, especially if it's your boss. So there are some things that can work for you and some things that cannot work for you. So you might even say to yourself, if it were not for my boss, I'd be happy in my job. And how many times have you said that to yourself? The fact is, there is no shortage of terrible bosses. They micromanage your work, they don't listen, they don't trust you to make a decision, and they treat you like a traitor for wanting to leave on time so that you eat dinner with your family. So, thinking that I'm going to just quit my job and go to a new job, you don't know, maybe in a new job there's another boss just like that giving you a hard time. So it's better to start dealing with it before thinking of moving and going to a new job. Like I said before, employees had the opportunity to leave, to get fired, to just find a new position, but they had fought for their position. As a matter of fact, what happened is an employee that I know, she complained to HR with a letter, not via phone, not via email, with a letter. She mailed a letter to them several times about harassment that she gets from the boss. When they came to investigate, they had fired that manager because they had asked other employees of what was going on. And when they fired that manager, they gave her a raise for her not to go to a labor department or whatever department that is, that for her not to be a little bit more tolerant of what was happening to her. So to your best advantage, just fight for what you deserve. Stressful circumstances and unpleasant people are really of life. They are as predictable as bad weather, but that doesn't mean you have to constantly walk around feeling powerless, stressed out, or angry. If you really don't like your boss, you could look for another job. But like I said, you don't know if the boss over there is going to be the same mean and micromanaging as your current one. And you can go work for someone you can respect, or you could stay in your job and continue to complain, moan, and feel stressed. Or you can work on changing the way you think about your boss. Frankly, I like the last option best. Not everyone can just pick up and find another job. Now that is hard work, and besides there's the mortgage to pay, the kids love their school, you live in a great community, and heaven forbid you should have to sell your house in a hurry. The traditional approach to solving any problem has typically involved taking some kind of action. In this case, it's finding a new job. And even then, you are never guaranteed that your next boss doesn't become the next boss from hell. But what if instead of taking action, you could shift something internally within you? What if you could approach this problem from the inside out? So this may feel as I've asked you to suck on a lemon, but find a way anyway that you can feel better about your boss. Go on, I challenge you, even though I know you're kicking and screaming with resistance and you are about to delete this show, the recording that I'm going to have it posted again. Just stay with me for a second and find something, anything that you can genuinely appreciate about your boss. What if you discover that your boss has a troubled marriage or no family at all? Would that change or soften your judgment about him? What if you realize that she may not have good people skills, but that she sure knows how to keep the company financially healthy and provide you with a job? Or what if you could appreciate his hard work and commitment to the company? And what about the huge pressure she must be under running the organization? When you can find that opening that lets some light in, even if it's just a crack, you will discover that your stress levels will diverge ever so lightly for a while. You will begin to feel less agitated. But there is something else that happens when you genuinely find that crack of light in something negative. Your own energy shifts. And when that happens, you begin to attract and rendezvous with a whole new fresh set of circumstance and people. Annoying people seem to be less frequent. Your day flows more effortlessly. Your workplace becomes a kinder and gentler place to inhabit, and your boss seems to stay out of your way. When you start to pay attention to how you are following your energy, when you decide that complaining, no matter how justified, depletes and tarnishes your vibration and the quality of your day, that's when you will discover the tremendous leverage you get from directing your focus. Stop agonizing about whether you should find another job, at least for a while, and put your focus on how you are being. It's so much easier than moving. This, like I said, it's going to happen whether it's in your work, in your life, personally. You might have a friend like that is so miserable. But you have to know how to neutralize the situation. And to neutralize your toxic boss, like for professionals responsible for a mountain of details, often in the midst of corporate chaos, taking some heart is part of the job. And support can add, like make the boss look good for their job description, right? But what if your boss routinely blames you for things that haven't your fault, or takes sole credit for your work? In a workplace setting, such injustice can be particularly perplexing. Not only is your livelihood on the line, but workplace politics and the corporate hierarchy can make it difficult for you to get your case heard. Most seasoned professionals have an unfair boss story or two to share. So I'm going to share maybe some horror stories that how these employees find solutions for dealing with a nightmare boss. So I have an employee that her solution was to talk your way to a cure. Mandy, who worked at a major publishing house, found discussing problems with her boss was key to finding resolution. This is what she says. I had a new boss come in that had replaced the senior executive who I had worked under for more than 7 years. From the moment my new boss stepped through the door, everything I did was wrong. She could tell me to hold her calls, I would, and then she would yell at me for not putting her authors through. Everything was a catch-22. Finally, I asked for a meeting and asked for how I could do a better job for her. What came out was that I was doing things the way my old boss wanted me to do them. My new boss was feeling a little uncomfortable about stepping into somebody else's job, office, and support staff, and was anxious to make her own mark. Once she explained her style and I put her at ease that I had no problem making changes and doing things her way rather than her predecessor's way, we were able to work very well together. This was her strategy. To talk to your boss, find a time to meet in the office and talk about how you could do a better job next time. Next one is to prove your innocence. That's another employee, Kyla. Good written records can help you make a case for unfair treatment or maybe even convince your boss he's wrong. After Kyle's boss at a securities firm blamed him for losing phone messages, he devised a strategy. This is what he says. I tried talking to him, but it became an I said, he said sort of deal. And it's hard to look your boss right in the face and say you're lying. So I bought a message pad that made a carbon copy that stayed in my book. Whether there was a dispute about a phone message, I pulled out my little book and there was no more discussion. Plus, it made it easier for my boss to return his calls because one of the problems was that he was losing his messages and didn't want to admit it. So now, if he loses a message, all he has to do is to ask to look at my book and we don't have a problem anymore. Then another scenario I have is Samantha's. So Samantha's boss at a research firm had a personal problem with her. Since Samantha couldn't change how her boss felt about her, she took her case to HR. And this is what she says. My boss just hated me, and I didn't know why. In my performance review, she even said she didn't like my sense of humor or the look on my face. What am I supposed to do about that? It was clear that I couldn't talk to her and I couldn't change who I was, so I went to HR and eventually they moved me to another department with a new supervisor. Of course, things are still a little tense whether we meet in the hallways, but at least I don't report to her anymore. You see, when you talk to HR, things change. Now, another scenario. Sometimes the only way to deal with an unjust boss is to find another job, particularly if you are pressured to do something unethical. Jane Marie was uncomfortable when her boss at a nonprofit asked her to sign papers for him. I had my doubts about my boss's integrity, although I had no proof. So when my boss started asking me to sign for government grant money and his signature did not appear on the documents, I got uncomfortable. When I refused, he began to make my work life miserable. He was systematically trying to get me to leave, and eventually I did. It was a small organization, and the only place to appeal to would have been the board of directors, and they were all handpicked by my boss. So I found another job in a larger organization that I love. I often tell my friends that if it hadn't been for my nightmare boss, I never would have found my dream job. So in this scenario, if this happens that it's really unethical, that they're doing something illegal, that's a sign that you need to look for a new job. Because if anything happens to that your current job, you are going with it, whatever it is. So here's another way of suggestions. There are so many suggestions on how to deal with it. It's just how you become a great leader in your part. So let's think about how is the other way you can find out to deal with a very toxic boss. Now I want to ask you, do you have a boss who is off the wall? Now, I'm not talking about nuts. I'm talking about a boss that is a bully boss. If it's any consolation, take comfort in knowing that you have more company than you can imagine. The simple truth is that bully or tyrant bosses can be found in abundance. Unfortunately, the majority can legally be institutionalized, and many cannot be bosses. Tyrannical behavior comes in all forms. There are bosses who are mind-controlling abusers, manic depressive and psychotic. There are obnoxious bully bosses who rule by intimidation, insist on getting their way, and fly off the handle easily. They treat subordinates like children and seldom ask for everyone's input. There are also predator bosses, a term that is explained in management consultant book that's called Brutal Bosses and Their Prey. It defines there are two species of tyrannical bosses, the conqueror and the manipulator. Conqueror bosses prey on employees' weaknesses. They find great thrills in treating the workplace like a battlefield. Once they sense an employee's soft spot, they pounce on it. The unsuspecting victim doesn't stand a chance. And manipulator bosses are the smoothest of bullies. They fear becoming less valued if their underlings get any recognition for exemplary work. Manipulator bosses are backstabbers who will go to frightening lengths to look good to their superiors. So what makes lunatic bosses act the way they do? The tyrannical behavior often stems from bosses not knowing what they are doing. A false assumption is thinking that bosses actually know how to manage people, and mention the word boss, and we immediately think that the person has some special abilities or training. And there are rules and training programs for almost every conceivable job, from sanitation engineer to nuclear physicist, but no set curriculum teaches you how to be a boss. An obvious way to compensate for a lack of skills is to be tough and unyielding. You stand a better chance of being left alone and unquestioned this way. Now, yet training alone won't turn a crazy boss into a sane manager. And whatever category your crazy boss fits into, the big question is whether you can work with him or her. Tyrannical bosses come in one of two packages. The first is the hard-nosed, tough, demanding perfectionist. They can be difficult to work with, but they will listen to reason because they're all about doing the best job they can. They also know that talented people make things happen, but they can drive you nuts trying to achieve goals. The second type, however, is even more difficult to work with. They are unyielding control freaks and have a total disregard for the facts. They demand that things be done their way. So, how to handle an off-the-wall boss? If you feel compelled to improve your situation so that you can at least coexist with your crazy boss, Take extreme care and use diplomacy when broaching the subject. Don't take an accusatory tone. Instead, put the burden on yourself. Begin by outlining the problem and suggest ways you and your boss can work together. A safer strategy is to lie low and stay out of the way of the tyrant boss. Do your job well and avoid confrontations at all costs. Only you can decide what will be the best solution. Whatever you do, remember that no job is worth enduring constant misery 5 days a week, not to mention obsessing about pending torture come Monday. So, you don't have to take a bully boss's constant abuse, and he doesn't endorse coping out by finding another job. So, all victims of workplace bullying can become what? Workplace warriors and use self-defense strategies that can restore power, dignity, and options to be bullied employee. The more you know about your despotic boss, the better you will be able to handle him. There are many types of bully bosses. Now, I want to ask you, do any of the following strike a responsive chord with you? For example, I'm going to give you examples of different types of bullies. Subtle bullies. What is it? They torment their targets with quiet but piercing techniques. Abusive bullies. These bosses haunt a target employee without mercy. Crude bullies. These people throw their weight around loudly and physically. Raging bullies. These people intimidate everyone in the vicinity of their out-of-control anger. Echo bullies. Not normally abusive, they mimic bullying behavior with their subordinates. Ghost bullies. These bosses guide, mentor, and supervise lower-level bosses in bullying techniques and tactics. Satellite bullies. These are people of stature who undermine the target by contributing to someone else's bullying. And before you march into battle, right? So observe about your bully bosses. First is personal confrontations with bullies are almost never productive. Management team members interpret any confrontation an employee might have with boss as also being a confrontation with them, and without well-documented proof of a pattern of behavior, they will likely view the employee as the problem. If bullies notice you are ducking them, they will not see this as sensible avoidance but as cowering behavior. Don't be afraid to make eye contact with your bully boss, and don't mistakenly think you can defuse a bully by getting personal and showing your human side. Bullies not only don't appreciate the personal side of others, they don't tolerate it. Details of your personal, spiritual, or emotional life are weapons in your antagonist's hands. Don't try and enlist the help of your HR department. HR can be the chilliest place any employee can visit, and also one of the most dangerous. HR allegiance is to the employer, and its goal is protecting the employer from legal claims. Approach rarely with caution and only when fully prepared. So you have to be fully prepared to go to HR department. So I'm going to give you some strategies of dealing with a tyrant boss. First is approach your bullying problem like a work project. Be methodical in how you behave, perform, document, and strategize. Take notes after an incident. Try to stay unemotional, even though he or she is trying to make you think the opposite. It is the bully who has a serious personal and professional problem, not you. Be a workplace warrior. Even if you plan to put out feelers for other jobs, dedicate yourself to vanquishing your abuser, not being a victim. And sweat the small stuff. Document even the smallest incidents, which often become the most important, illustrating a pattern of bullying that might not otherwise be apparent. Teasing counts. Sarcasm counts. Ignoring you or criticizing you counts. A very public glare or silent treatment counts. And don't let yourself get isolated. Every day, pick out someone you haven't talked to for a while. Have a brief but focused conversation. Bullies work hard to alienate targets from their coworkers. Don't let that happen to you. Display self-esteem and broadcast a positive attitude. Pay attention to how your appearance, such as hair and clothes, is perceived by others. Make your personal space an oasis for calm and taste. Try to stay in safe spots. Your abuser is less likely to attack when you are around other supervisors, known allies, particularly upright employees, and customers or other outsiders of importance to the employer. Make a list of those people and places. During a bullying situation, excuse yourself. Don't beat a hasty retreat. Don't leave the building. Tell your abuser that you are late for an appointment with HR, for example, or casually excuse yourself to use the restroom. Never enter the restroom if you are being pursued by a bully. Now, during an attack, try distracting your abuser. Pick up something physical as long as it's not threatening items such as a critical file that needs the bully's attention or a note with an important phone number that needs to be called. Sometimes a simple distraction is enough to get him or her to stop. Next thing is protect your personal information. Tell bullies as little as possible about your life, family, friends, hobbies, interests, religion, and so on. Information about you gives them power. Hold your cards close to the vest. As you are building a case against a bully boss, the less you talk about your story to others at work, the better. Controlling what you say, when you say it, and to whom needs to be part of your overall well-organized strategy. Now, you might say my boss is not a bully. He or she is just toxic, right? Now, this is another variation of the tyrant or bully boss is a toxic boss, a term that has been around for a number of years. So, toxic bosses are everywhere, and many are accomplished and extremely successful. Some are working for or running well-known companies. Others are geniuses who created breakthrough technology. On your first meeting, they can be well-poised and ingratiating and can seem like they'd make great bosses. But that changes quickly once you start working for them. What you thought would be a dream job turns into a nightmare. Toxic leadership seems to be an equal opportunity career path. Even though we are supposedly smarter and more psychologically tuned in than we were a few decades ago, we continue to tolerate, even prefer, and sometimes seek out toxic leaders who degrade our lives and diminish our happiness. Toxic leaders are everywhere, and they are not going away. We see them in every arena: business, politics, religion, education, athletics. Technology industries are rife with toxic managers, especially brilliant, warped geeks responsible for creating breakthrough technology. So, how can we identify toxic bosses? Unfortunately, toxic bosses are hard to spot before you are hired. The reason is that many have jerky and high personalities. But if a sixth sense tells you what all is not kosher with this person, or that he's too good to be true, or is unconsciously gnashing his teeth, do some homework and speak to employees or former employees. Unfortunately, few of us are going to act on our instincts. What can you expect from toxic bosses once you're unlucky enough to be working for them? Let's look at some destructive behaviors. Leaving employees worse off than they found them by undermining, demeaning, and terrorizing them. Consciously feeding their employees illusions, that enhance the leader's power and impair the employee's capacity to act independently. Playing to the basest fears and needs of the employees. Stifling constructive criticism and teaching supporters, sometimes by threats and authoritarianism, to comply with, rather than question the leader's judgments and actions. Failing to nurture other leaders, including their own successors. Maliciously setting constituents against one another. Identifying scapegoats and inciting others to castigate them. Ignoring or promoting incompetence, cronyism, and corruption. Can anything be done? You are playing with fire if you intend to fly solo and confront your lunatic boss. Forget heroics. If you feel compelled to right the situation, there is strength in numbers, or at least you hope so. There are probably many others who share your concerns but feel as lonely and isolated as you do. Get them together and plan your strategy. But even then, you are walking a precarious line. Trying to straighten out a crazy boss is like trying to soothe a starving cheetah that's about to consume you for dinner. But if you've got guts and sense of adventure, why not have it out with him or her? You'll certainly feel better about yourself, and you may be surprised by the results. Woolly bullies, right? Other findings from the Employment Law Alliance study has found 81% of bullies are managers, 50% of bullies are women, and 50% are men. 84% of targets are women. 82% of targets ultimately lost their job. 95% of bullying is witnessed. So you just need to understand it is going to happen, but it's better for you to have a little bit more sense of what you should do. Use your instinct. Do you need to continue living and working for the company, just dealing with that, or you can just have and look for a new job and take the risk of having another toxic manager? Now, there's more I want to add, that your boss is bad for you, and why bad bosses infect your life, and what you can do to stop them. So, for those of us who have had to deal with annoying or aggravating bosses know how it's tough to shake it off at the end of the day. But a new study explains why it's so hard and why so many of us suck at it and wind up bringing out stress home, where it doesn't just hurt you, it hurts your family, your friends, and your other relationships. Now, let's look at the study and talk about some ways you can learn to check your bad boss at the office door when you leave work. Science explains how your bad boss follows you home. Most of us have a hard time dealing with stress. So I just want to explain that there are ways to deal with it, but it's still everywhere in our lives, especially at work. Sadly, few of us are able to leave it behind at the end of the day. If you have a boss who micromanages you or makes you feel bad just for showing up in the morning, it's time for you to take actions. So the researchers questioned about 1,100 employees at different companies to find out how closely a boss's management style and employee morale correlated. The results weren't surprising, and I'll just explain to you here. According to a story at The Atlantic, employees who felt their autonomy and their contributions were respected and reported higher morale and better on-the-job performance. Employees who felt like their boss didn't trust them to do the work they were assigned or who motivated them by making them feel bad for not being more productive were the most stressed out, and subsequently took that stress home with them, where it overflowed into their personal lives and relationships. A separate study by Baylor University, published in the journal Personal Psychology, drew the line between stressed out employees who felt abused by their supervisors and higher instances of familial tension and difficulty at home. None of this may seem surprising to most people. If you had a hard day at work, it's likely you will have little patience for issues that you would normally be able to deal with at home. Even so, these are the first few studies to put a fine point on the fact. So what you can do about your stress and your boss? Dealing with a bad boss is a tricky proposition. And I know a number of people who love their jobs but hate their managers. And when someone tells them to just quit and find a different job, they resist. Mostly because they feel like everything else about their job is so perfect. They just needed to get over this one thing to make it worthwhile. Quitting is an option, but it's not the only one. Now, let's look at some other ways that we discussed earlier. Get a hobby or another activity to distress right after work. One of the best things you can do to relieve your stress at the office is to treat yourself to something rewarding and relaxing immediately at the end of your workday. Hit the gym every day after work, for example, right? You will do your body and mind a world of good, and it will help your work off the stress of the day. You will get home and open the door without that extra baggage. Visualize, meditate, or take time alone to power through it. One of the tips that I mentioned is to take some time alone and practice muscle relaxation technique or visualization techniques that remove you from the things that stress you out, whether you do it in the car before you head into the house every day or before you begin to commute home from work. Take some time to let your conscious mind take over. Identify that you are stressed and break it down so you are more aware of your actions and your responses to your family and friends. Transfer a different team or role in your company. Some companies encourage this and others don't. But if yours does, it might be time to find another department to transfer to. Talk to your HR rep, or if you know they are looking for talent, a person in that team, and ask if you can apply for the position. You will have to handle this delicately. You don't want your current boss to sabotage your efforts, but you do want to be upfront about your desire for a change of scenery. If you can swing it diplomatically, you may be able to stay with your company. Continue to do what you love, or even try something new and leave your bad boss behind. Next thing is build your case. You don't want to start treating your boss with the same unprofessional demeanor that they treat you with, but you will need to start thinking on your feet and coming up with ways to parry their attacks and barbs, whether it means you have to document your work so you can prove how busy you are. Great for when you make you feel for when they make you feel bad for not being productive enough. Or start keeping a work diary or an awesomeness journal to document your successes and prove your value. It's time to start a paper trail in your favor to use when your boss complains. Worst case, it's a paper trail you can use when applying to a new job. So that means that you have documented all your successes, and if it still doesn't work, you can just go to an interview for a new job and show your successes there. So you're not losing out. Let your boss know that this is once really tricky, but if your boss is a bad boss, not out of malice but out of ignorance or ineptitude, a tactful and professional approach may work wonders. Of course, this won't work on a boss that's a jerk or just doesn't care, But if the problem is that they are busy themselves or suffering under the weight of their own boss and letting it bleed through to you, they may be perceptive to change, and once you talk through it, they may be on your side. I can vouch for this from experience. No one wants to be stressed out, and if you can appeal to your boss's better nature, they may understand and be willing to compromise and work with you instead of against you. Now, talk to HR or your boss's boss. Again, you have to really have faith that this may actually work and you won't be retaliated against. In many cases, a bad boss is just a person standing in front of a worse boss, or the bad boss and their boss have a closer relationship than you think. HR may also be a trap. Not every company takes complaints by employees seriously, and as soon as it gets back to your boss, you could be in for it. However, if you do trust your company's HR rep or your boss's boss to mediate, or know they value you more than your boss might, talk to them. Focus on the issue or behavior and not the person, and let them know you want to help your boss and you are otherwise happy and engaged in your role. But these very specific things have you stressed out. Ask how they can help, how they will follow up, whether your conversations are confidential, and when you can expect to hear from them. Some of what they do is confidential as well, but make sure you get some confirmation you have been heard. And then just quit. There is a tipping point where nothing you can do will make a bad boss any better. And no amount of exercise after work for therapy is going to change the fact that your boss makes you miserable every day. And in turn, you inadvertently make your family and friends miserable when you're around them. Even if the job is great, it might be time to look for better opportunities where your work will be appreciated. It can be difficult, but your health and your relationships are worth it. Whatever you do, if your boss is stressing you out and you can see the signs of it seeping into your personal life, you need to do something. What you do is really a matter of the degree of stress you're feeling. If you think it's manageable with exercise and meditation, then don't wait. Start now. If you know you will never really be able to deal with it and your boss will never change, more drastic actions may be warranted. In the end, though, stress impacts your productivity, your health, and now studies show the health and well-being of the people closest to you. You and they deserve better. Now, you can do some homework and read the articles. There are 7 good articles to read if your boss makes you miserable. So, take a pen and a paper, think about it. I know that there are so many things you can do, but what happens if it doesn't work? So read those articles. Number 1 is article is called 3 Bad Boss Personalities and How to Deal with Them. Dealing with someone who hogs the spotlight and makes all the credit and takes all the credit, or perhaps you have a manager who always tells you no matter how innovative your ideas. So this article will help you how to deal with that kind of personality. Another article is how to deal with a verbally abusive boss who crossed the line. Dealing with the name calling, put downs or words is absolutely inexcusable behavior. But sadly it happens. So follow the steps that the article gives you. How to deal with a verbally abusive boss who crosses the line. The next article is what to do when you hate your boss but love your job. And for those who do have something positive in their work lives, a job they love, but a horrible boss that gets with it, this article is for you. What to do when you hate your boss but love your job. Next one is 3 professional ways to manage a boss who doesn't understand work-life balance. Learn the difference between your supervisor having high expectations for you or unreasonable and unrealistic ones, where you are doomed to fail. Okay, all of these articles are going to be, this recording is going to be on my page, Let's Talk Careers with Sara. The next article is Presented Without Sarcasm: 3 Lessons I Learned from Micromanaging Boss. Working under a micromanager is beyond frustrating, but on the upside, it teaches you why the small staff matters. So this article is for you. What I learned from my first and worst boss. You actually can learn a lot from a terrible manager, even one who belittles you and only uses negative motivation. The last article I am going to say is 7 things you will never take for granted after working for a horrible boss. While you might not quit, be at the gratitude stage of getting over a miserable leader, the experience will eventually make your future workplace environments seem so much better. So read that article. And when you are dealing with a bad boss, you're most likely feeling pretty stressed out. Sometimes supervisors move on, but that's not guaranteed. And how long do you really want to wait for your situation to improve? And if you truly are miserable, instead of crossing your fingers and waiting for change, consider taking the steps necessary to get out. And start sprucing up your resume and start thinking about your options. And if or when you find yourself in a room with your next potential boss, keep an eye out of these red flags that reveal these managers might not be any better than your last. I am running out of time, so that will be another topic we'll discuss in my show perhaps next Wednesday. And I would like to say thank you for those who are listening to me. Thank you so much for doing your homework, by listening to experts like me about jobs, about resumes, and about how to be happy in a work environment. So I really want to say thank you again. So I'm going to see you next Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Armed Radio. Let's Talk Careers with Sara. You are tuning in on Armed Radio and Let's Talk Careers with Sara every Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. I talk about careers and job hunting. If you would like to ask a question or would like to hear about previous shows that you have missed, you can find me on Facebook at Let's Talk Careers with Sara. You can learn about jobs, tips, and advice on my page. If you have a career-related question, you can just message me on Facebook.